Hello, hello. I hope you're as excited as I am that Darwin Day is this week. That's Darwin on the right. Um, and that's a life-size printout of him, which is in my office somewhere. I see a similarity. So his friends call him Charles. There'll be a lecture link here to what we're doing right now. Darwin was literally born on the same day as Abraham Lincoln. Literally the same day. Not they share a birthday, the same day. If we were in class, I'd ask you to deduce who was more important to American history or world history, Charles Darwin or Abraham Lincoln, and you would probably guess that I want you to say Darwin. But the truth of the matter is, it's really Abraham Lincoln. I don't like saying Darwin's theory of evolution. I'd rather say evolution by natural selection. Saying Darwin's theory of evolution makes it sound like if Darwin had been hit by a bus, that theory would not exist. That it's a personalized theory. It's just Darwin. You could say that about Freud. You could say that about Jung. If they had been hit by buses, their weird theories would not have come into existence. But theory of evolution by natural selection would have happened with or without Darwin. He did a great job of thinking about it and researching the issue, but natural selection, the time had come. The world had data sources that couldn't be ignored, and somebody was going to figure it out. And I really should have put this link up because this I want wiki for this. For this is Russell Wallace. So there's Alfred Russel Wallace, who independently, based on parallel data sources, came up with the theory of natural selection. And if Darwin's ship had gone down, Wallace would have been more famous right now. And actually, Wallace's thinking on natural selection is what triggered Darwin to finally publish after putzing around with his Origin of Species book for about 20 years. Wallace's theory came in the mail, and Darwin, I'm sure, must have had to sit down because it was Darwin's theory, very efficiently stated in Wallace's book or Wallace's paper. So they shared the original discovery, but because Darwin had amassed a huge amount of information and published The Origin of Species, which sold out almost immediately. Darwin gets the credit. So obviously I'm into evolution. It's a very important concept. It's important for this book. I'm also historically a Skinnerian, so I know stuff about B.F. Skinner, and we'll deal with some of that. This chapter is quite good. It overviews everything, and I can only deal with highlighting things. You have to curl up in the book and let it wash over you. The first chapter in many psychology books is the history of psychology, and this book is no exception. So you have to learn about the history of psychology, which really starts with philosophers. And so it's a good chapter. And Boughton and I must be about the same age. We went through the field at the same time. He's surprised by the same things that I was. I never met him. I hope someday, maybe. But how we got to where we are. There's a lot of names in here. And there's our friend Pavlov. And saliva and a little joke sealing envelopes. Birds are, which are dinosaurs. They're pretty wicked smart. I don't know why I have 1995 highlighted there. I don't see the significance. I think my problem is I can highlight, but I have trouble not highlighting things. So learning theories, this book deals with tons and tons and tons of theories, and it competes one theory against another. It may annoy you, but this book is going to demand that you think about things and evaluate things, which is why it's such a good book. But it's not for the faint of heart. You really have to delve into it and wrestle with the concepts. And I'll help you with some, but as you know, I'm a big fan of book learning, and it'll be you and the book. So Rene Descartes comes up in the beginning of virtually all psychology textbooks. Machinery. What happens with thoughts about the brain and learning is whatever technology is hot when the people who are doing the thinking are thinking, that tends to be what they incorporate in their theories. So gears were important. Water was important, water pressure to Descartes. And he incorporated all that. And he talked about reflexes, and he thought that everything, all animals had reflexes, but only humans had a soul. He was a dualist, mind-body dualism. I live my life as if I'm a dualist, but I do my science as a monist, that it's all mechanical, but magically mechanical, as we'll see. So, did I hit the thing twice? Make sure I only did one page there. There he is. So there's Descartes and his famous picture of little threads running through the body and ringing the bell in the brain. which is connected to the pineal gland, which Descartes thought only humans had. That was his proof that we were unique and we had a soul. And notice I said a soul, and you can't have a left soul and a right soul. So Descartes was looking for something in the body that was unitary. The pineal gland is unitary. And in terms of, we don't, the English doesn't have a word for consciousnesses or consciousness. There's only one consciousness, but it's brought to you by billions of neurons. So Descartes thought that the soul affected the pineal gland, and the pineal gland is closely aligned with ventricles in the brain, which are filled with fluid. And the logical, that is parsimonious thing to think was that the fluid would flow back to the muscles and inflate them and make bodies move. Muscles don't actually inflate, they contract. Boy, I got in a huge argument with faculty from theology about Hobbes. I was charged with being a Hobbesian, and I must admit I didn't know what that meant. I had to go look it up, and yeah, I'm a Hobbesian. And Hobbes and hedonism, and these are important philosophers, man and machine, all good stuff. And there's John Locke and David Hume, British empiricists. The concept of tabula rasa is very important. Steven Pinker, who I'm a big fan of, wrote a book which in English means blank slate, which is what tabula rasa means. It's a very good book. It's either in my office or somewhere in this house. If you have time on your hands, it has lots of pages, 509. And Pinker writes extremely well, but he's wicked smart. So this book will make you think too. He's not a fan of us being a blank slate, that you can just do anything you want to an organism based on its environment. That was popular in psychology occasionally, but you can't take the organism out of behavior. And of course, that relates to evolution. So I too I'm a fan of Steven Pinker's book. And tabula rasa was an interesting theory. It made sense at the time, as many things do, but it's too one-dimensional. And there's Immanuel Kant. Looks like he wasn't sitting up straight. Contiguity is going to be important in this book. I meant to highlight that one. Contiguity simply means that two things occur at the same time. And as it says, they occur closely together in time. In other words, you don't care whether A causes B or B causes A. You just care that A and B occurred together. So that's an interesting theory. And it's not ridiculous. But it's also too simplistic, too one-dimensional. And I'm a big fan of Bowles, so I will mark his name. I met him. He is now dead, and he was a little bit older than I, and he taught someone who's important in learning theory. He was his graduate advisor, and he had a pretty serious case of polio, in his youth. So the first time I saw him, he was walking with crutches and braces. And if you're anti-vaccination, man, you should have gone through the polio era. And I just dodged it. One of my friends, who's a neuroscientist, he showed up to evaluate our neuroscience program, and he was using a cane. And I was using a cane before my hip transplant, and I assumed that he was moving in that direction. It wasn't true. He was an ethnic minority, and they didn't get good health care when I did, and he too got polio. And the motor neurons that were left after polio were wearing out late in his life. And he's an age mate. It's like one of the possibly the only person I know who's a comparable age, maybe even younger, who had polio. He suffered from being an ethnic minority. Taste aversion learning, I'm a big fan of, in part because I knew moderately well a person very important to that theory. We both did time together at UCLA, and his lab was down the hall, and I actually helped him move when he retired from UCLA. Comparative psychology. There's a term I don't use anymore, but I was trained in that. And now you would probably call it animal behavior. That is comparing behavior across species. Sekhanov doesn't get as much credit as he deserves in terms of understanding the brain and reflexes. Pavlov gets all the credit, but reflexes of the brain, that's important. And there's my good friend Charles, and 1859, Origin of Species by means of natural selection. The struggle for survival is often referred to as being aggressive and hostile, and survival of the fittest, a phrase Darwin did use but did not coin. There's the middle-aged Darwin. He was a Brit, and the Brits had a very hierarchical social structure, and his family had more money than they knew what to do with. So Charles got to do what Charles did. This figure on the right, every time I look at it, I love it more. People often refer to as the tree of life. This is Darwin's original sketch. That ain't no tree. That's a bush. And Boughton is amazing. He says bush. And by the way, look that often the branching points have 3 branches. I'll be showing you a figure very shortly where 3 is a magic number, which, by the way, was a great song. And he wrote several books. There's Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex. His theory of sexual selection was subsumed into natural selection for decades. Now it is often recognized as being relatively independent. And now we will go to my figure about natural selection and human behavior, and how we should look at human behavior in order to understand it from an evolutionary perspective. So there's Darwin's A, there's Wallace. We'll see later that Skinner lived in Scranton for a while. So I have this PowerPoint. And, whoops, I'm in the editing mode. Where am I? Oh, it should work one way or the other. So, whoops, I'm in the editing mode. So let's go here. This looks like the editing mode too. Let's go to the publish mode. Okay. All right. So this will hurt some of your heads. To understand current behavioral organisms, you have to understand where they came from in an evolutionary sense and what kind of triggers were in that environment and what kind of behaviors help them survive in that environment. So I'm going to quickly show you one possibility. It's been estimated that we spent the vast majority of our evolutionary history in hunter-gathering groups, and those groups didn't get much bigger than 100, possibly 10 to 100 or 10 to 150. So let's build a hunter-gathering group. And of course, the most important thing in the world is you, and that's that little Y floating there. So there you are. But you're related to other people. And of course, mom and dad generated you. And that's as high up the figure as we're going to go. We now have 2 generations. And remember the figure, the bush from Darwin that I said had 3 branching points. We're going to be using that model here too. So mom and dad generated you. You're going to marry someone, but we're not going to show any mating partners beyond mom and dad. But they're going to generate 3 children. And those other 2 children are of course, your sibs. So there's you, there's 2 sibs, comparable age. You're going to find someone to mate with. We don't care who. And you are going to generate 2 children, your offspring. Your sibs are going to generate 3 offspring. Your sibs each will generate 3. Your nieces and nephews. And in terms of breeding populations, we already have more than 10. And everybody obviously is quite related to each other. Now, mom and dad came from somewhere. Their parents are probably dead, but each of them have 2 sibs. Those are your aunts and uncles. By the way, I can't say aunts because that doesn't have a U. So mom and dad have 2 sibs, aunts and uncles. And at about the time mom and dad started generating children, which includes you, your aunts and uncles generated 3 each, first cousins. And now we got some serious numbers here, 12 first cousins. At about the time you started generating children, your first cousins started generating children. And each time it's a multiple of 3. You're not going to be drawing this because I can't figure out how to do that easily in this testing format, but you will have to describe it. There's not much to memorize. There's only one pairing that's visible, your parents. Every other pairing is invisible. There's only 3 generations, one up from you, one down from you, and each node has 3 children generated. Let's count them. 66. You, mom and dad, your children, 2 sibs, 6 nieces and nephews, 4 aunts and uncles, 12 first cousins, 36 second cousins. So this is not what Darwin was drawing, because he was talking about the big evolutionary picture. But I love that sketch. It is not a pine tree where humans are the angel or the star at the top of the tree. It is a bush, and no one twig of that bush is more important than others. But when we look at behavior of any organism, the evolutionary history of that organism is important. And it's important. Social behavior is important. When I wasn't busy fighting my peers over Hobbes, we would fight over altruism. Altruism is, sacrificing something of yourself without expectation of repayment. And some people would say that altruism proves that we have overcome our biological roots. If that were true, in the sense that we're the only one with souls, then you would say that if you looked at all animals on Earth, you would only find altruism in the one species with a soul. That would be us, and other animals would not be altruistic. I ate the eggs of an altruistic species this morning. Altruism is not unique to this species. Ants and bees are altruistic to an extreme extent. Altruism can be very important to some species. It's pretty important to us. Think about why you hold doors for somebody, and you pick up someone's book if they drop it. You're not doing it because you think, well, someday they'll pick up my book. I don't think. I think you do it because you feel like it. It's thoughtless. It's mindless. It's not quite a reflex, but you are prepared to be altruistic. And that's part of the human condition. And that's what we should be encouraging in our species, and often we do. So now back to the chapter. Oh my, Darwin was so clever. So clever. He wasn't done with his book. I'm not sure he would have ever published his book if it weren't for Wallace motivating him. He was kind of obsessive. So there's Lloyd Morgan and the dog, and comparative psychology, which is what I was trained in. And then there's Morgan's canon, parsimony, the simplest possible explanation for the available data. That's an important concept, not just for learning and psychology, but for virtually anything. Thorndike, there he is, and those are his puzzle boxes. Obviously, they're homemade, and the cats would be put in there, and there'd be food outside, and the cats had to figure out how to get out. And he graphed their learning curves. Law of effect, originally that was stamping in and then later stamping out. And that was important. That's still kind of important. And there's Second again, and Pavlov. Pavlov, we used to not like him because I was an American and we were capitalists and Russians were dirty commies, and he was from Russia, so we made fun of him, and we liked B.F. Skinner. As I learned more about Pavlov, he was not a dirty, rotten commie. He was his own person. And before he started his research in classical conditioning, he had already won a Nobel Prize, man. This guy was no slouch. And did he obsess? You want to see obsessive researchers, people who do classical conditioning. His labs allegedly the floors had sand, like a foot of sand in them. So when people walked around, they wouldn't make noise and disturb his animals. He used to control when carts could go by his building. He was obsessive in terms of control in his research. And he studied conditioned reflexes. This was not his first love. He was doing something else at first. But he thought it was going to teach us about how the brain works. It's relevant, but it didn't quite get us where we wanted to go. Watson was important, and structuralism. He was also important for advertising, and also doing pretty horrible things to children. There he is in his bow tie. He's kind of cute. And he married Rayner, 1920. There's research they did together. Little Albert, I can probably find you a picture of that. It's disturbing. So there's little Albert, and there's Watson scaring little Albert. Little Albert desperately trying to get away. There's a socially appropriate graph of little Albert reaching toward the cute rat, cute or bunny, and when he would do that, Watson would hit this huge piece of metal, and Albert would become frightened and cry, and eventually he learned to cry at the sight of the furry animal, and he was afraid of Santa. And apparently, he wasn't too messed up, but this kind of research would never be approved in the modern era. Oh, here's the picture I was looking for. Here's Watson and Rayner doing research on reflexes in children. Infants have very strong grasping reflexes. So Watson is putting something like a pencil in the kid's hand, and the infant grabs it, and you can literally pick the child off the ground. And this is thought to be important in terms of children grabbing on often to the hair or other body parts of mothers, which promotes survival. Sorry about my voice. I used to be a cheerleader. I blew it out. So there's a discussion of little Albert and some of Watson's research. And I highlighted Boughton because he's important. He's in the book. Of course, he wrote it. And here's Watson's famous quote: "Give me a dozen healthy infants, well formed, and my own specified world to bring them up in, and I'll guarantee to take anyone at random and train them to become any type of specialist I might select." Blah blah blah. That's really overstated. Although, environment and learning are important, and this is like a liberal dogma that society can fix virtually anything. Not literally true, but it's something to aspire to. And there's B.F. Skinner. That dude had a giant head. It's like a light bulb. I saw him lecture late in his life, and there's a Skinner box on the right, which we'll deal with more later. Met Associates is a very major manufacturer of research equipment, including I don't like saying Skinner boxes. I prefer to say operant chambers, where the animal is hitting levers and things are happening, which will become clearer as we go through the text. Where's the published site? Tim has too many tabs open. I know. So Skinner wasn't born here. His father got a good job with a coal company here, and they bought this house on North Washington Avenue. And they had a maid, and it was a good life. And when I used to go to my mom's house in Greenridge, I would drive right by there. So that's 2001 North Washington Avenue. Please don't go knock on the door. But, that's a good neighborhood. By the way, our state senator, Casey, lives across the street and up a little bit. And our president lives up several blocks further. Oh man, I'm sorry about if you're hearing that. This person blows me up occasionally. So Skinner lived here, not for very long. He went off to college, and sadly, his brother died very suddenly during a sporting event. I think it's Scranton Central, as it was called then. And there's his grave in the Dunmore Cemetery. 8th of April, 1923, at age 16. Sad but true. And now back to the textbook. I saw Skinner give one of his last lectures. Boy, he was in a death match with cognitive psychology. He lost that battle. But right to the end, man, he was complaining about cognitive. And there's radical behaviorism, and he got sick of learning theories. He got sick of people, he believes, squandering their entire lives trying to defend their theory of choice. It was like turf warfare for gangs. And he said, forget all that. Let's just understand behavior and not worry about competing theories. There was value to that. And there's operant reinforcement. Mazes were popular. They've come back a little bit. Operant means you operate on your environment, and the classic Skinner box has a lever. And we're going to deal more precisely with reinforcer. But the idea that red-blooded Americans liked was, this is capitalism. You get to do what you want. Free will, man. You want to hit that lever, you hit it. You don't, you don't. Not like that commie classical conditioning where the environment controls you. You control your environment. We now know it's not dichotomous. They always interact together. And as we'll see in this textbook, they are blended. Boy, when I took learning theory in grad school, they were not blended. So there's the table respondent, controlled by antecedents. That is things that come first, like Bell meat powder, and things are elicited, it's mindless. And operant, that's free will, that's capitalism. If you want to do it, you do it because you like what you get. Behavior is emitted, not elicited. Boy, that's going to be dealt with heavily in here. And there's the operant respondent distinction. This is a good book. And there's Tolman. I vote a little over trust. So he started talking about theoretical constructs, and by the way, there's Bowles again. I never met Tolman, but I did see Bowles. Theoretical constructs. This will start getting us into cognitive, and the next figure on the next page is important. So there's the theoretical construct. First, you don't see it, but things can affect it, and it can affect behavior. Up top, you have something that looks more like a path analysis, where there is no internal construct. I do research now with artificial intelligence, and some of the graphs we generate look a little bit like the top one, but they include those nodes in the middle for arguably intervening variables. I still get nervous when I see Clark Hull's name. For some reason, when I was in grad school, I just couldn't get this guy. And it was very mathematical on all these symbols, and you had to know what every symbol meant and blah. He was important, and you'll see his symbols, and you'll have to learn some of them. And as I said earlier, very often, whatever we think now, or at a particular time, like Descartes with water and reflexes and gears and tubes, whatever's popular. When I grew up, Bell Laboratories, which used to control the phone company, they had a series of educational videos that were shown on TV, and they showed you how the brain and the body worked. And the way it worked was like telephone switches with people putting wires and plugs and phone calls going places and things. And now we're obsessed with computers. And so people model things after computers. A Nobel laureate spoke here a while ago, and he showed a printed circuit board from a computer, and he showed the nervous system of a leech. And he said, you take a razor blade and cut any of those lines in the circuit board of a computer, and it's dead, Jim. But leeches, they can adapt. That's different. There's many paths. We are not printed circuit boards. We are complex leeches. So computer modeling is still important to some people, and I think the next page has a figure. That's a classic learning theory, and it has nodes and arrows, and it's too simplistic. It's way, way, way too simplistic, as we'll see later. One thing about this chapter is you are not going to understand everything in this chapter as it happens. As you can see in the chapter, he keeps saying, as we'll discuss in chapter 8 and 6 and 7. So, this is to give you the gestalt, the big picture. And I used to teach that. In fact, I may still do it this semester. But what's going on in the nervous system is way more complex. There we go. That's more like what's going on in there. Connectionist viewpoint, parallel processing. Neurons are impressive, but they can't match the speed of a computer's central processing unit or graphic elements on a graphic card. So how do we keep up? And at the moment, we often can't keep up. We do it by parallel processing, by doing multiple things at once, which is why a singular word for consciousness is kind of silly. What's going on in there is a blizzard of things that come together. So there's parallel processing, an important concept. All these things will be revisited later. Types of memory, short-term, long-term, human animal learning, parallels, differences. There's Boughton again. Things have been evolving since I went to grad school, still, and they will continue to evolve. So that's a nice, mature discussion of that evolutionary process. We do experiments on animals. I used to do research on fear. I used to shock animals. I used to stress them. I studied pain and pain inhibition, and fear can inhibit pain. And we discovered important pain inhibitory systems through that research. Why is that name there highlighted, Damian? For two reasons. One, a graduate of the University of Scranton went and got his PhD with Damian, and also Damian wrote a textbook that I used to use, but I was offended by his covers because they were silly. And I'm sick of people thinking psychology is silly. It ain't. And when he put a guy getting kissed by an elephant as the cover of his textbook, I said goodbye. So there's a discussion of tools for understanding learning. And we've already dealt with some of the stuff, classical conditioning, in instrumental or operant conditioning, response learning versus, there's Bowles again down there. Boy, Rescorla, you're going to see Rescorla until your eyes bleed. I never met him. He's very important. So this is in anticipation of the regular book, rest of the book. SO learning, stimulus outcome learning, response outcome learning, SO and RO. Become very comfortable with those symbols and what they mean, because you won't be able to read the book without them. And you won't be able to understand figures without them. So spend quality time with that paragraph and be able to speak to your peers and in your lectures about S's and O's in a rational way. Boy, I'd love to have a crow. They are wicked smart. This is an example of animal behavior, what used to be called comparative psychology. And here are crows doing their thing at the edge of the ocean, which has tides. And those are whelks, which I didn't know until I saw it. And crows are not well adapted to pounding on whelks and opening them, but they can fly good. And they fly over rocks and drop the whelks a bunch of times until it cracks, and then goodbye whelks. So this is a complex learning task, and again, birds are dinosaurs. They're quite smart. Parrots and crows are very impressive, among others. And there's going to be a figure later that goes back to that one. And humans and eating. You can also extend this to love. You can analyze, and you should start to analyze different behaviors based on these SORO type terms. Kids in play. This is really cute research. People who do developmental research are so clever. So if I had known about this when I had certainly my first set of children, I would have done it. You connect often the kid's leg to a string that is connected to the mobile over the kid's head, and the child learns that if he or she kicks their leg, the mobile moves, and they're quite amused. There's lots of really, really creative research on infants. Very creative. And they're not dumb little people. And drug learning. If you want to deal with addiction and drugs and reinforcement, and by the way, drugs are addicting because they affect circuits in the brain that evolved to attach you to things. And love is an addiction, and I mean that quite literally. You really have to understand classical conditioning to understand these things well, and also response outcome learning. You have to understand learning. This is not a useless course. This is used heavily in helping autistic children lead more productive lives and dealing with addictions and helping people control anxieties and obsessions. This is a very relevant course. So this is the complex figure. You just take a deep breath. You take a deep breath. And we have the crows, we have the babies, we have people taking drugs. Stay calm. Spend some quality time with that figure. If you can't understand that figure, you're going to be in trouble later. And I really can't do it for you, but you have to read the text, you have to look at the figure, and you have to understand those arrows. And certainly you may have to deal with that for the quiz next Tuesday. And we're done. So there's an overview, in the early days, and then philosophers and 1800s and Darwin. And obviously, I think that PowerPoint I gave you is important. And there's Watson. Oh, introspection. Boy, yeah. That sucked up so much energy. And Skinner with his giant light bulb head. Operational behaviorism, Tolman, more complex. And then after World War II, we have the cognitive revolution, which Skinner fought against, but cognitive one. There's no doubt about it. And modern learning theory is an amalgam, a mixture of many things. But if you don't understand each thing independently, you're going to have trouble making your amalgam. And here's some questions that maybe one or two may show up on the quiz, and those are important key concepts and terms. And that, my friends, is it for the Chapter 1 lecture. Thanks for dropping by, and I will now stop.